Summary of The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Holden Caulfield promises to share the account of what occurred to him right before the previous Christmas in a letter that he is currently writing from a nursing home where he is recovering from an undisclosed illness. Holden's story starts at his school, Pency Prep, on the day of a yearly football game that all of the students usually go to. Holden doesn't go to the game because he just got kicked out of school for failing 4 of his 5 classes. Instead, he goes to see his old history teacher, Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer gives Holden a speech in which he agrees with what Dr. Thurmer, the teacher, has already told him, that life is a game that should be played by the rules. Spencer says that Holden needs to keep this in mind as he plans for his future. Holden acts as he agrees with Mr. Spencer as he listens, but he really thinks that his teacher is a phony. As the conversation goes on, Mr. Spencer makes him read out loud an unsatisfactory essay he wrote about the ancient Egyptians, which makes Holden angry because he already knows he didn't put enough effort into the task. So, he tells a lie and says he has to go get his things, but he just goes back to his college room to read. Once Holden gets back to his room, his annoying next-door neighbor Ackley comes in and stops him from reading. Later, his arrogant and attractive flatmate, Ward Stradlater, bursts in. When Holden asks him why he left the football game so early, he says it's because he has a date with a girl named Jane Gallagher. This surprises Holden because he knows Jane Gallagher. 2 years ago, when his family spent the summer in Maine, he spent time with her when she lived next door. Holden talks a lot about Jane while Stradlater gets ready for his date. He goes into small details about her personality. As he talks, it's clear that his memories of Jane mean a lot to him, but all Stradlater thinks about is whether or not he can have sex with her. This makes Holden nervous, but he doesn't say anything and even agrees to do Stradlater's English homework while he's gone. Holden has to write a short description essay, so he decides to write about the baseball cap that his late brother, Allie, used to wear. Stradlater comes back from his date a few hours later. Since he left, Holden has been on edge because he doesn't know what Stradlater is doing with Jane. Stradlater reads what Holden has written, but instead of answering his questions about the date, he criticizes him for not following the rules, saying that he told Holden that the essay had to be about a place or a house. Holden grabs the piece and rips it to pieces because he feels hurt and angry. He then asks Stradlater what happened on his date with Jane. He gets even more angry during this tense talk, so he punches Stradlater and calls him an idiot. Stradlater quickly beats him because he is bigger, but Holden still calls him a moron, which makes Stradlater knock him down for good. After his fight with Stradlater, Holden decides to leave Pency early. He plans to stay in New York City until his parents hear that he's been kicked out of school because he doesn't want to be at home when they find out. As he's getting his things together to leave, he turns and yells, "Sleep tight, you idiots." Then, he gets on a train to New York, where he flirts with a middle-aged woman and rents a room at the Edmont Hotel. Soon, he starts to feel lonely and sad, and he starts to act strangely. When he goes downstairs to the hotel's bar, he dances with a woman named Bernice Krebs, who doesn't care about him at all and would rather hang out with her 2 friends. Holden isn't scared, though, and is happy with how well she can dance. But he soon gets tired of Bernice and her friends because he thinks they're phony, so he takes a taxi to a piano bar where he and his older brother, DB, used to go often. On his way, he wears a new red hunting cap and asks the cab driver what happens to the ducks in the Central Park pond in the winter. The driver tells him that he should care more about the fish since they have to stay in the frozen water. Still, the driver says that nature will take care of the fish, so Holden shouldn't worry about it. Holden goes back to the hotel after a boring time at the piano bar and takes the lift to his room. Maurice, who works at the lift, offers to send a woman to his room for $5 while they are on their way. Holden agrees, but when Sunny, the prostitute, shows up, he is so unhappy that he says he can't have sex because he just had surgery. When she hears this, she asks for $10, but he only gives her the $5 he and Maurice had settled on. Shortly after that, Sunny comes back with Maurice, who hits Holden in the stomach while Sunny takes another $5 from his wallet. The next morning, Holden sets up a date with Sally Hayes, a girl he's been with before. He doesn't like Sally's attitude very much, but he thinks she's pretty. Plus, he's lonely and just wants someone to talk to. In a perfect world, he would call Jane Gallagher, but every time he thinks about it, he decides that he isn't in the right mood. So, when he has some time to kill before his afternoon date with Sally, he walks around town. As he leaves the church, he hears a boy singing a song, "If a Body Catch a Body," coming through the rye. The boy's voice and the beauty of the song move Holden. Holden walks all the way to the Museum of Natural History to find his younger sister Phoebe. He thinks that her class might be there on a field trip. On his way, he thinks about how much he loves the museum because its displays never change. He thinks that a person can go there over and over, and the only thing that will change is the person who goes there. But when he finally gets to the museum, he can't get in, so he takes a car to meet Sally Hayes. Things don't go well on the date. Holden doesn't like the play they go to, and he doesn't like the fact that Sally talks to a boy he thinks is a phony. After that, they go ice skating, but Holden has a hard time enjoying this because he keeps thinking if Sally only wanted to go because she knew she could wear one of the skimpy dresses the rink lets girls wear while they're skating. After they're done skating, they go to a bar restaurant near the rink, where Holden starts talking about all the things he hates. He even asks Sally to run away with him to a house in New England because he wants to live a totally free life. But, unfortunately for him, this dream falls apart when Sally says no to his offer and tells him to stop shouting. When he gets angry with her, he calls her a royal pain in the ass. When Sally starts crying and asks Holden to leave, he does so happily, even though the whole thing makes him feel very sad. After hanging out with Sally for a while, Holden calls Carl Luce, an old friend. Holden asks Luce, who is 3 years older than him, and goes to Columbia if he wants to have dinner together, even though he has never liked Luce. Though Holden had called Luce a phony the last time he saw Luce, Luce agrees to meet him for drinks later that night. When he gets there, though, he says he doesn't want to have a typical Caulfield conversation, but Holden has had so many scotch and sodas that he can't stop talking. So, he asks Luce a lot of personal questions about his sexual life, which drives him away. Holden then goes to Central Park to watch the ducks in the lake. There are no ducks, it's cold, and he imagines his own death, which he knows would make Phoebe sad. He chooses to go home to see her because of this. Holden sneaks into his family's apartment, wakes up Phoebe, and tells her he's going to live on a ranch in Colorado. Phoebe knows that Holden has been kicked out of school, just like he was at his other schools. She tells him that he's disappointed his parents again, but she doesn't do it in a way that worries him too much. She then asks him what he wants to do with his life. Holden tells her that he wants to be a catcher in the rye, a person who saves children by catching them before they fall off a steep cliff at the edge of a huge rye field, which is something he has been imagining a lot lately. Holden calls his favorite teacher, Mr. Antolini, while he is at home. Mr. Antolini used to teach English at Elkton Hills, where Holden went to school. Holden got kicked out of school again, which makes Mr. Antolini sad, but he tells Holden to come over right away if he wants to. Holden gives Phoebe his red hunting hat before he leaves. He then sneaks out of the apartment and heads to Mr. Antolini's house. When he gets there, Mr. and Mrs. Antolini are happy to see him, and Mr. Antolini sits down with him in the living room to talk about his life. Holden starts to feel sick as they talk about his future, but he tries to listen as Mr. Antolini tells him he's going for a terrible fall and tries to get him to be less set in his ways and less judgmental. Holden listens to what Mr. Antolini is saying, but he is too tired to really pay attention, so Mr. Antolini makes a place for him to sleep on the couch. Soon after that, Holden wakes up all of a sudden and feels Mr. Antolini's hand stroke the back of his head. He leaves because he thinks that Mr. Antolini is doing something perverted. After a couple of hours of sleep in Grand Central Station, Holden chooses to say goodbye to Phoebe before going west. To do this, he goes to her school and gives a teacher a note to give to Phoebe. The note tells Phoebe that he will say goodbye to her at the Museum of Art before he leaves. After he gives this note, he goes to the museum and tells two young boys about the mummies in the Egyptian area. It was a sweet moment. But his lack of food and sleep and the fact that he drank too much the night before start to catch up with him, and he passes out in the bathroom. He wakes up though, and when he goes back to the hallway, Phoebe is there with a big suitcase. She tells him she will go with him, which makes him realize how silly his plan is. He doesn't go through with this plan, though. Instead, he takes Phoebe to the zoo and watches her ride a carousel. She gives him his hunting hat back between rides, and he promises that he won't go west. Holden's story moves back to the care home, where he is getting therapy. He doesn't know if he'll work hard when he goes back to school, and he wishes he hadn't told so many people about how he got kicked out of Pency because it's made him miss the people he talked about.
About the author. Jerome David Salinger was born in Manhattan and grew up on Park Avenue. His mother was Scotch-Irish Catholic and his father was a famous Jewish cheese importer. After having trouble at a few preparatory schools, Salinger went to Valley Forge Military Academy from 1934 to 1936. He went on to enroll in several schools, including New York University and Columbia, but he never finished. In 1939, he took a fiction writing class at Columbia. This helped him get serious about writing, which he had been doing on and off since he was a kid. During World War II, Salinger joined the infantry division of the U.S. Army and fought in battles, such as the 1944 invasion of Normandy. During the war, Salinger kept writing, and in 1940, his first short story came out in the magazine Story. From 1941 to 1948, he published many stories in magazines like The New Yorker, The Saturday Evening Post, Esquire, and others. Salinger's only full-length book, The Catcher in the Rye, came out in 1951. It brought him a lot of attention. Salinger didn't like how quickly he became famous, so he left New York and moved to Cornish, New Hampshire, where he lived until his death in 2010. During his last years, he kept avoiding the public and stopped putting out any new work.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.